righty, welcome, welcome, welcome. How is everybody doing? Okay, for a party room, that kind of sucked. Let's try that again. How's everybody doing? My mom would be so proud. So, Mr. Sound Guy, I'm a little hot. If you could turn me down 1/2 of a click, that would be super cool. Thank you, Mr. Sound Guy. So, welcome everybody. This is Manage Group Policy with Advanced Group Policy Management 4.0. And let's just get the bad news right out of the way. Okay? There's good news about what we're going to talk about, and there's some bad news. Let's just hit all the bad news first, and then we'll get to all the awesome good news. Okay? So, first of all, the product is called Advanced Group Policy Management. It's not Advanced Group Policy Superpowers. All right? The product is not going to somehow magically make you do more on your desktop, even though it's part of what's called the MDOP suite of utilities. So the idea of MDOP, which stands for Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack, or MDOP, this tool, AGPM, is one of 5 or 6 tools, depending on how you count them, inside this thing called MDOP. Now, how the heck do you get MDOP? Now, this is where there's some good news and some bad news. And again, I just want to sort of set the stage, make sure we're all on the same page, and I don't want anybody to think, oh man, I took the entire 75-minute session only to learn that it's not the right tool for me. Does that make sense about why I'm doing this? All right? So here's the deal. You can only get MDOP under 2 circumstances that I know of. And again, AGPM, this tool that we're going to talk about, is only available if you are licensed for MDOP. So let's talk about, again, how you get licensed for MDOP. You get this set of 5 tools, which I like to call getting 5 T-shirts for the price of 1. So you get these 5 T-shirts when one of 2 things is true. You're an SA customer, and then you buy into MDOP, and I think the current price is something like $10 per user per year from Microsoft. Okay, so you have to be an SA customer first, plus the upcharge, then you get MDOP. Okay, and this is one of the 5 tools in there. P.S. The other couple of tools that you might know is the AppV, Application Virtualization, is a big one. Okay, there's also the new tool that's actually the most fun to say ever, and BAM! Yeah, which is the Microsoft BitLocker and Management Utility, or BitLocker Management Utility. And there's a whole lot of other utilities in there. But this is a popular one. And again, you have to be licensed for MDOP in order to even flirt with this tool. Okay, that's the deal. So that's one way to get MDOP. The second way to get MDOP is if you are a Windows Intune customer, which is Microsoft's I manage your computers from the cloud technology, where there's an agent on every single one of your computers. If you are licensed for that, which I think costs I'm going to just throw the number out there. If I'm wrong, I'm sure your Microsoft representative will be happy to clarify my statement. But it's something like $10 per computer per month for management. Now, if you do the upcharge there for an extra, it's like going to the Chinese restaurant and they say, would you like extra noodles for only $1? And those extra noodles you get are you get the entire MDOP suite. You are licensed for MDOP if you get the Windows Intune plus the extra upcharge for yet only $1. How can you say no to $1? So with that in mind, that's the deal, okay? So this is not a utility that you should be able to download instantly and deploy. It's not part of the operating system. I just want to set it so that way if somebody's like, okay, this isn't for me, you're free to go. There's lots of other great sessions. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jeremy Moskowitz. I'm the guy that runs gpanswers.com, who is already a member of my gpanswers.com tip of the week. Awesome. Turn around. These are the sexy people. Now, you can be sexy as well if you quickly get your cell phone out, quickly, less than a minute or 2, and take a quick scan of this. Who already scanned it and it worked? Excellent, excellent. And just for fun, just so I know who my people are, who's taken my intensive 5-day workshop battery? I either came to your class, I came to your world. Excellent, a handful of you too. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Now, if you don't know me, if you've never seen me speak before, I tend to be kind of an interactive kind of guy. I love questions. And you know what? They're having me bait the fish. So they gave me 3 things to give out here from the Microsoft client team, which is what this talk is from, the client team. And what this is, it's a 4 gig stick that actually has juice to power your cell phone as well. 4 gigs plus battery. How do you beat it? I'll give these 2 the best questions. Not stump the chump questions, the best questions. And then I'll also be giving away 2 of my group policy books as well for those who scanned. And even if you couldn't scan / you want to leave early, I have one of my new best friends in the back. Wave, my friend in the back, right there. Yes, this guy right there. He's got a little basket, and you can just drop your business card in there, and I will mail you, if you win, I will mail you a book. How does that sound? I'm sorry, let's try that again. How does that sound? But wait, there's more. Yes, it turns out that I have a free, you don't have to buy a damn thing, e-chapter, downloadable PDF e-chapter that I will mail everybody who I know is here. How will I know you're here? Either you scan this or you left me a card. I will send you a full how-to guide for AGPM, the thing you're about to learn, directly to your inbox. That's all I ask. Thank you. All right, so with that in mind, let's talk about AGPM. This is a play in 3 + 1 acts, okay? A play in 3 acts. The first act we really need to talk about is the built-in delegation model. It's true that we can do some stuff in the box, and that's important, and we're going to understand what's possible and what's not possible, get that out of the way, and sort of understand like where the limitations are and what's good and what's bad. We won't spend too much time there. Then we're going to dive into Act 1, why you care, architecture, and installation. So we're gonna spend some quality time understanding how AGPM is installed. Good news, it's easy. So we'll cover that and talk about some of the pitfalls in that. Act 2, we're gonna pretend you are an island. The idea here is that in order for our brains to sort of understand what the step-by-steps of the tool work, we're gonna just sort of pretend for a little bit of time that we're one person not working with others. And that is where we're gonna spend some quality time. And then finally, Act 3, you are not alone. You are working with other admins. And that is what the point of AGPM is. Advanced Group Policy Management, okay? So let's see, by a show of hands, who here has ever created a GPO and then quickly deleted it thinking, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that thing? Yes. Or you've edited a GPO, you clicked a setting and thought, and you actually walked away from the console thinking, oh crap, I'm gonna lose my job. Something similar like that. Yes, thank you for being so very honest. I appreciate that. So who here has ever inadvertently linked a group policy object to some random place and then started getting phone calls from the sales department wondering what the heck? Thank you for being so honest and awesome. That is really cool. You know, even though this is a big room, we call this a safe space. You can admit anything here. Okay, so there is no are you sure in anything in group policy land. You right-click, you click edit, you start poking around. As soon as you click enabled and OK, boom, that thing is whizzing around your Active Directory. Who knows what domain controllers it made it to in the 13 seconds that it took you for you to realize you made that mistake. Some client during that 13 seconds asked Mr. Active Directory, hey, what new group policy objects do you have for me? I have this setting that you weren't supposed to get. Boom. So there's no are you sure. Now, so there's no, so like I said, no are you sure when creating, linking, or editing. There's no awesome granular management either. So the idea is that I can create GPOs and you can edit them, but there's no sort of workflow management between all of us on the same team. And we're going to talk about how the workflow management stuff can work. Who here has ever, like I said, you have a GPO and it's working for a while, then all of a sudden the calls start coming in later. 2, 3, 4. You go on vacation, you come back from vacation, or you're on vacation, the calls start coming in. Gosh, if only there was a magical way to, well, you can restore. You can actually restore stuff, and restore is okay, but restore can take a little bit of time, and it takes you a little while to figure out what did we change. So there's no easy, quick way to just roll back if there's problems detected, and there's no history of changes to group policy objects. So imagine somebody comes in drunk after having gone to Atlanta partying all night in TechEd 2010 and modifying, I'm just picking on you, sir, because you're holding the beer, I mean the soda. So, yes. So imagine my friend here, and I'm just going to pick on you because you're right there. Chris, can I call you Chris? Thank you. So Chris decides at 2 in the morning to edit some group policy object because the boss calls him up saying, I need you to kill the control panel, and uh-oh, he makes the wrong settings change. So wouldn't it be great for you to know exactly what Chris did so you could figure out what was correct in the GPO before Chris decided to do this 2 in the morning? So no history of GPOs. As soon as you click edit on it, if you didn't do a backup of it before that, you don't know what was changed. So this is life, like I said, without AGPM. So let's go ahead and just sort of dive into, ever so briefly, with only a couple of moments, the built-in delegation model. So in order for me to do that here, I'm going to click on this little puppy over here. OK, great. So the built-in delegation model kind of goes something like this. Well, you've probably seen this in the back recesses of your brain, and you probably already knew this existed, but let's kind of take it to a different place here. One of the first things is that the separation of duties is about who can create group policy objects and who can link them. Oops, I'm in the wrong place there. There we go. So there's a group called Group Policy Creator Owners. And this is an old school group that works still just totally fine today, but this isn't the ideal way. If somebody is a member of this group, they can create new group policy objects in what a lot of you know I like to call the group policy objects swimming pool. So in other words, if you're a member here, you can create GPOs in the swimming pool. But it turns out that doesn't give you all the juice you need to make a connection and do something with that. If you're a member here, again, all you can really do is create GPOs. So that's the old school way of doing stuff. The new school way is to use the Group Policy Management Console, which I happen to have right down here. You click on the swimming pool itself, the Group Policy Objects node. You click on the Delegation tab, and the people who you grant rights here in the Delegation tab are those who are now gifted the ability to create new GPOs. Now, once again, just because you can create GPOs doesn't mean you could do anything particularly useful with it. You could have the most beautiful, wonderful group policy object ever, but unless you link it someplace, you actually haven't really performed any magic at all. A group policy object just hanging out in the swimming pool doing nothing is just doing nothing. So that is the first place that you would go, is right here, the Group Policy Objects node. The second old school way of doing stuff was back here. You could click under, say, Sales, West Sales Users, just by way of example here, just some random OU here. And you could, if you wanted to, delegate control. And the delegation of control wizard allowed you, if you were so inclined, to grant somebody like West Sales Admin 2. Okay, so we're granting this dude the ability to manage group policy links, yet again, the old school way, which still works perfectly if you were so inclined to do it this way. Not the preferred method, but again, I'm just sort of bringing up a point here. You create GPOs, you have the right to do that. In order to do the linking, you also need to have that right over the place you need to have delegation. In the new school way, what we're going to do is we're going to click on my West Sales Users here, West Sales Users. Click again on the Delegation tab. And again, this is built into the operating system. We haven't touched the stuff we're really here to talk about yet. This is Act 0. You click on Delegation. You have the link GPOs right, and you grant that dude the right. West Sales Admin 2. Okay? So that's the whole basic idea of that. So that's the separation between basically church and state here. One guy can create the GPOs. Another person, if they have access rights to link them, has access rights to link them. Okay? Not a lot of granular management here. Not a lot of way for me to say, I'm creating the GPO. I need you to verify I haven't done anything stupid, and for another person to sort of help it get into play. And that is exactly what we're going to talk about next. So let me go ahead and change back over here. And like I said, I'm happy to take questions. So since this is a play in 3 acts, I'm happy to take questions maybe between the acts. Please use the mic. Maybe Mr. Sound Guy can turn the microphones on if somebody wants to ask the first question and win a very cool power stick. Going once. You can win a power stick. All you got to do is get up and go to the mic. Going once. Going twice. All right. Yes, just come right up.
If you have the right to link group policies, do you also have the right to create them?
Nope, that's the whole idea. So his question is, if you have the ability to link them, do you somehow magically get retroactive rights to create them? No, the answer is no. They are independently dealt with rights. So congratulations, you won a random drawing. Oh, not exactly random. So, yeah, give him a round of applause. Ask the question. Good job. Good catch. Okay, rock and roll. Now you're all thinking, man, I could have asked that question, got a 4-gig stick. But you didn't. Okay, next up on the docket. So now let's talk about life with AGPM. Okay? Like we already described, there's kind of a pants-wetting experience that we might all had at some point, changing a group policy object that we really wish we hadn't. And so now with AGPM, the idea is that you're going to get a full check-in, check-out, and workflow management system. Let's talk about this in terms of like how a library works. I'm sorry, I feel bad. I haven't been to a library in like 15 years or something absurd. So just go with me. I think the analogy's probably changed a little bit, but if you've been to grade school in the 80s or the 70s or the 90s, or if you took school during that time, hopefully this model will still work. So let's talk about how going to the library works today. Okay? So imagine you wanted to get Moby Dick off the bookshelf. Okay? You decide that Moby Dick is part of your school study project, so you walk over, and in this special library, actually, it's not a regular library, you get to make edits to these great works of art that are already on the bookshelf. So you can't just walk out of the library with Moby Dick. You actually have to, well, check it out of the library. Remember how this works? Take the book off the bookshelf, you walk to the librarian, he or she opens up the back of the book, says, yep, you've got a valid card to take books out of the library, stamps it, and now there's literally no other book on the bookshelf for anybody else to use at this point. Turns out, in our magical library, when you take the book off the bookshelf, in this crazy little analogy, you're actually photocopying the entire book really fast. And you're taking the photocopy with you. Okay? Then, I know in real life we wouldn't normally do this, but in this kind of crazy world, we're going to make excellent additions to Moby Dick. Maybe the whale wins at the end or something. I don't know. Did I just blow the ending for you? All right, so long story short, you change the ending of the book, and then you're ready to put it back on the shelf. Now, putting it back on the shelf is a no-no. If you walked right into the library and you were doing the librarian a favor by putting it back on the bookshelf, that would probably not go over so well. So what you're going to do instead is talk to the librarian. She's going to look at your edits and approve your edits first before it goes back on the library. In fact, what you're going to do is the photocopy that you've used is now going to, well, you're going to take the version that's on the bookshelf and you're going to put that in cold storage, and then you are going to take your copy and put it in a library. And now the next person that needs to use Moby Dick will have your changes. That is generally what AGPM does. AGPM gives you the ability to check out group policy objects. Nobody else has the ability to edit that group policy object while you have it out. You get to make all these fantastic changes, not to the real copy, not the one that's on the bookshelf. No, 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 the one that you have a copy of. Okay? So you're no longer doing stuff live. You're now doing this in an offline kind of environment. You make your changes in the offline environment, you get permission to put it back into play, and then it gets back on the bookshelf, and everybody's happy utilizing the latest, greatest copy of Moby Dick. That is essentially what AGPM does for us, okay? So, what else do we get with AGPM? Well, we get version control, which is rollback. So the idea is if the librarian didn't like the kinds of stuff that I did in Moby Dick, if she didn't like my ending, for instance, she could actually first of all, reject my approval to put my copy back on the bookshelf. That's a distinct possibility. Or she could agree that it was a good addition and then say, you know what, I don't like the ending after all, take the new version and put back on the old version as well. Again, think about GPOs instead of Moby Dick, although either one works. Then we're going to spend some quality time a little later with role-based delegation, the idea of who can do what against what particular group policy objects. We just talked about offline editing, and there's an extra bonus at the end called templates. So I will spend the quality time there when we are ready to do it. Okay, so again, here the general philosophy is in the slide deck. I just went over it, but I'll just sort of briefly make sure I didn't miss anything here with regards to group policy object. We already talked about the librarian model, but for the general philosophy here, again, you're going to create, when you create new GPOs, by the by, I didn't mention this, you can decide to either do it genuinely live, for real, in production, or an offline copy only. That's your choice. There are some scenarios where you may not want to have a totally online, just an offline version. You may want to have an online as well. The idea, the vocabulary word we use when we make new GPOs in AGPM is controlled. Here's the deal. When you get your project kicked off with AGPM, you're going to have all the days before AGPM and all the days after AGPM. You have to think about it that way, literally. All the days before and all the days after. Because all the days before, you were walking right up to the database, you were doing all the stuff live, probably making some mistakes now and again, and doing it right into the database. All the days after AGPM, what's going to happen? Well, if you use AGPM correctly and work with the system, everything you do will be self-contained within the system. And therefore, all newly created GPOs are what's called controlled. So I like to say that there's controlled GPOs, that's all the new stuff, and that leaves all the original stuff as uncontrolled. So basically, they're uncontrolled like wild horses. They need to be controlled. So you just, and I'll show you how to do this. You simply right-click over all the stuff you've ever done, and you control them, and now it's all the days after. Does that make sense? It's really not hard. It's just conceptual. All right? Again, you check out a particular group policy object. When you do that, it cannot be edited by anyone else. Some of you are thinking, that sounds really bad. Somebody checks out a GPO, they go on vacation, and now somebody else needs to edit it. What am I going to do? Not to worry. Not to worry. There's always a way to take ownership of these checked out group policy objects or basically reject the checkout. Okay? Don't worry about that. Now, when you edit the GPO, you're not editing the real deal anymore. You're editing this offline copy of Moby Dick that you made. You photocopied it before you left. Go ahead. Yes. Yes, that's a great question. His question is, do you still use the same group policy editor while you're doing the actual editing? Is that your question? Indeed, you do. So that's exactly right. And for that, my friend, you get a power stick. I got one left. Uh-oh. Mr. Guy, you ready for it? All right, here you go. Go ahead, all the way in the back. Yes, you? Yep, come on.
Does the user has to log back in and log out and log back in for the changes to the group policy to be effected for him?
So your question is about group policy processing in general on the client, right? So thank you for the question. You ready for it? There you go.
Thank you.
Yep. So his question is, do clients need to log off and log back on to accept changes? The answer is no. And that's not part of the talk today, but to briefly answer your question, there's this thing called the background refresh cycle for most areas of group policy. So if you are already logged on and you get a new directive, sometime in the background, you're going to snap up the new group policy object. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it seems like I have done this before, and for some users, the changes was affected, and for some, they weren't.
What's that? You need to learn group policy troubleshooting at a very deep level? Good news for you, my friend. I have 5 days of intensive training and workshop on that. So, okay, let's continue onward with AGPM here.
Jeremy, sorry.
Yeah, sure. Yes.
That's one minor point is my understanding of it at least, is when you apply group policy, if there's processes that are running that are not looking to see if there's updates, they're going to continue using the old settings. And so in some cases, you may need those processes to restart, which may require a log off, log on, or restart of the computer, depending on the policy.
Yeah, here's a good example. I appreciate that. Yep, that is a fine point. So let's just wrap that up real fast. Let's say you've got kill the control panel as an edict that you've set in group policy, and your client is already inside control panel. Okay? Well, it doesn't usually magically close the control panel while they're using it. Most things don't magically close or magically need to get wrapped up that way. Occasionally, even though you got the new directive, that new directive might require closing a window, closing an app, or logging off, or a reboot, depending on how that actual particular policy setting is configured. So thanks for the fine point. Appreciate it. Okay, so let's get back to what we're here to do. So now that we've checked out that group policy object, it can't be checked out by anybody else. And like I said, you edit the group policy object, and it's not live. You're not editing this puppy live. You're editing the offline copy. Now, when you check in the group policy object, you've told the librarian you're ready to get it back into play. What are you going to do? It's true that other people, other editors on your team could actually check it out and also edit it. So just because you've checked it in, again, it's not live. Others can check it back out, undo your changes perhaps, add to that group policy object, tweak the settings you want to. It's not live until you deploy. Okay, there are two optional steps in the middle here, which are review and approve. But the point is that deploy, the thing is not actually live in production until it's deployed. Now, if you are thinking, wow, this sounds just like SourceSafe for group policy, you're on the right track. Okay, that is essentially what it does. So again, AGPM does not somehow magically give you more superpowers on the client. I will mention how to get more superpowers on the client, your Windows 7 machine, at the end of today. But AGPM is about AGPM management. It's about management, not about superpowers. Okay? Okay, so like I said, what about existing group policy objects? I already blew my joke here. It's not a problem. Even if you have 200, 300, 1,000, whatever group policy objects, and you want to get them to the place for you to utilize them in this new idea, this new utility, AGPM for you, what are you going to do? You're going to control them. It's super easy. They live in a place called uncontrolled. Couldn't be any easier. You look at uncontrolled, you'll see your 300 group policy objects that you already have, and you control them. What is that going to do? It's going to buzz through all 300 of the ones that you've selected, make copies, which are now in production, and also now in the database. So now the next time you click edit on one of these group policy objects, are you doing it live or are you doing it in the database? Well, if you use AGPM, you're doing an offline edit in the database. Okay? So let us go through some of the moving parts here, some of the things that I mentioned so we get a feel for it. We're going to act as a little island here. We're going to pretend We're going to pretend we're just one guy and we implemented the tool. And you're thinking to yourself, that is downright silly because, hey, Moskowitz, you just said this utility is really best used when I have a team of people. Yet, I actually know of people who have implemented this as a one-man team. For instance, you have a very small shop, you have only 50 users, and you still implement this. Why would you want to do that? Well, of course, all the obvious protections. You have rollback. We're going to talk about history. You've got the ability to quickly see differences in group policy objects. But there's still yet another reason to use this, even if you're just one guy or gal. You may want to do this if you want to have a really good track record of compliance in your world. If you want to prove to auditors this is what happened in our group policy world, this is a pretty darn good way of expressing what has occurred over there, okay? So let's go ahead and see the utility. Now, the thing about AGPM, and we're going to talk about installation second. I'm going to show you how to use it first, install it second, and then work as a team third. So we're going to go kind of slow here. The deal is that when you load AGPM, not a lot happens. In fact, there's a server piece and a client piece. We'll talk about those during the architecture part. But to actually use it, you're going to look here under change control. So let me say that again. AGPM is not a separate utility. You don't find agpm.msc or find agpm.exe. You don't run it or execute it or otherwise launch it. When you launch the GPMC, you get AGPM. It's a system within a system. Okay? AGPM is a system within a system. So what we're going to do, we'll click on the change control node here. I'm going to click refresh here, make sure I'm connected to the database, which isn't really a database after all. And you can see I've got, if I look closely in my swimming pool here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 group policy objects. But if I look here under controlled, I have 2. I have 2, which means that everything else will be here under uncontrolled. Okay? So the idea is that imagine that we just got started in my AGPM implementation. I installed it. I have all the days before and now all the days after. So what am I going to do? The very first day I get AGPM going, in fact, we're going to prove a point here. Well, I guess I'll go ahead and do that later. But for now, I'm just going to right-click. I'm just multi-select all those guys, right-click, and click Control. And every action, everything you do in AGPM gives you the ability to make a comment. Well, I might make some silly comments while I'm here, but in real life, you're going to make the comments that make the most sense to you. Getting started with our AGPM implementation, controlling all these things on day one, or whatever is important to you. You can make silly comments, but I'm not going to do that. Well, I mean, I am, but you can do whatever you want. So now, let's take a look at this dialogue. The group policy ninjas in the room will think to themselves, wow, this dialogue should look incredibly familiar. Well, I have nothing left to give you. But anybody know what dialogue this looks like in group policy land? Yeah. It does. It looks exactly like the backup routine. Because, here's the best part, AGPM is built upon the backup routine. We're going to talk about the architecture in some detail, but look how great this is. If you're starting to put the pieces together, it turns out there's not a lot of architecture around there. It's built upon the stuff you already know how to use. So here we go. We've got all those group policy objects are now, in fact, controlled. That's it. Now, if everything goes perfectly in your AGPM implementation, from now for the rest of your life, you will never see another group policy ever in uncontrolled. Does that make sense? You'll never need to go to uncontrolled ever again, because if you do everything perfectly and everybody's on board, you're only making controlled GPOs. Okay, that's the whole point. Yeah. We're going to get into that. This question is, no, that's great. This question is, what happens to the access rights in the GPOs? I'm going to cover that, I promise. Okay. So what we're going to do now is let's go forth and create a brand new GPO. Let's say we want to do something with it in real life. Actually, let me go ahead and do one more here. I'm going to create a GPO just for fun. I'll call this sales 1. Doesn't really matter what it does. I'll link it over to my East sales users here. I know I've done this outside of the system. I'm doing that on purpose for a couple of reasons here. I'll go to policies and I'll set some stuff here under control panel. I'll take this guy. I don't even know. No, go ahead and disable that guy. We'll go to next. We'll click enabled. Go to this guy and we'll click enable again. Okay, so now I've made some settings changes on some of these guys. Let me go ahead and click on uncontrolled here. I don't see it. Why don't I see it? Well, again, it's checking in to Active Directory. You have to constantly refresh it. So not a big deal. Right-click over, refresh. There it is. Okay, I'm going to right-click over this guy, and I'm going to control him. And well, I'm going to leave a note. This one was created outside AGPM. Next time, don't do that. Okay? Boom. Doing this little backup routine, and it should be done. So again, I'm just sort of proving what happens when you install AGPM. There's no magic technology that's going to definitely guarantee 1,000,000% enforce all admins to definitely use AGPM. There are some boundaries and some fences you can try to put up, but I want to stress something about AGPM. It's a process tool. It is not a magical force you to definitely always use it tool. Okay? So, and we'll talk about some of the implementation details around that. I just want to put that out there right now. Just because you load it doesn't somehow magically mean you've got force fields on everybody to use it. Okay? So now that I've got my brand new control GPO, let's make some changes to this guy. So I'm going to go to, well, no, I'll create a new one. Why not? I'll right-click and I'll go to New Controlled GPO. I just hover in the white space here. You could also go to the Change Control node and go to New Controlled GPO. And there are two ways to create a control GPO. Well, you could do it live and an offline copy, or just an offline copy. Again, there are some scenarios where you might have it live and need to get it in there and edited right away, and maybe, I'm not sure that that's going to be useful for most people. I tend to we'll create it in the archive only, which is an offline copy. So we'll call this West 2, and link to West sales when complete. Okay. I'll talk about some of the other options that are on there a little bit later. Okay, it's now completed. Excellent. So that's West 2. And notice, again, even if I refresh the group policy objects node, the real one, the one that's out there live doing the work for me in production, there is no West 2 group policy object. The only place on planet Earth this thing lives is an offline copy in a well, not even a database. I'll explain what the architecture is in a second. But it's offline. So it's not live. It's not linked anywhere. It's not doing anything. Go back to the change control node. We're going to right-click over this guy. We're going to check it out. Checking it out, again, if we go back to our library model, what are we doing? We're going to take a photocopy of it for later use. So we can take a photocopy of a live one, which this one isn't, or a photocopy of it that's already in the database. I keep saying database. It's not actually a database. So, okay, gonna make my first edits here. And when you check it out, something special happens. You get this. I'm going to zoom in on it, but not have it hovered, not have it highlighted. See that little red stuff? Let me zoom it. It's pretty cool, huh? Okay, so what has it done? It's given a little kind of wraparound and a check mark to say, now that this thing is checked out, nobody else on my team can edit it because I've got a copy. I've got the copy, the editable copy right now. Again, can you take ownership of this puppy if you need to because the guy goes on vacation having it left checked out? Yes, you can do that. But we're just talking about normal circumstances for right now. Okay? So it's now checked out. Let's keep with the model. We're going to right-click over and edit this guy. Let's do some stuff to it. In fact, it doesn't really matter what I do with it. So I'll go back to control panel here. I'll do same kind of stuff I did earlier. Next, enabled, and fine. Great. So I make my changes, whatever those changes are. And PS, the group policy preferences and all Microsoft client-side extensions are supported in AGPM. We'll talk about how that works when we get to the architecture part. Some third-party client-side extensions are usable, but not all client-side extensions. So you do have to test if you're using third-party client-side extensions to make sure that they actually work in AGPM, and that's important to you. Yes, my friend? Custom ADMs. Custom ADMs should work because they work with the registry client-side extension, so they should check in and check out just fine. Okay? But if you have a vendor third-party client-side extension, you should check with the vendor to make sure that they're compatible or not compatible. By way of example, for those of you who are familiar with my policy pack tool, it is compatible. By example. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to close this puppy up. I've made some changes here. I'll go ahead and click stop here. And I'll go ahead and, well, I'm ready to use it. Even if I'm ready to use it, it doesn't matter. I can't deploy it directly. I need to get it back in the database first. So I'm going to put it back on the bookshelf. I'm going to right-click over there and check it in. And when I do this, I've made my changes. It all went awesomely. doing its thing here. Okay, super duper. The little checkout goes away. Does not mean it's live. If we refresh the group policy objects node, the real live stuff, we have not got it into AD yet. It's still just outside of AD, hanging out. So now if we want to actually use this thing, we'll right click and deploy, okay? Now, West 2. So we created this one from scratch. So when we deploy this thing, we never had any links on it ever in the first place. So AGPM will restore links of existing group policy objects that you controlled, but it doesn't manage the links for stuff that is new. It has no connection to that. Let me say that again. AGPM will restore links to things that it controlled itself, but it can't magically be dictated where the thing is going to be linked in the system. Will that change in the future? I hope so. I think it's one of those things that should be addressed at some point. So go ahead and say yes here. And then it turns out we need to know what we learned in, well, a couple minutes ago with the original delegation model. If we don't have the right to link it after it's deployed, we can't actually do any magic with this group policy object. So now it's in the swimming pool. Here we go. It's successfully deployed. West 2, why don't I see it? I have to refresh. I'll go ahead and do that here. Refresh that. There's West 2. Where is it linked? Well, it's a great GPO, but it's not linked anywhere. I have to know that I'm going to put it on West sales users and link it myself, right? So again, just to be super clear, if you control a group policy object and it had links on it, it will restore them back to the same place. If you never had any links on it because you created it fresh, it has no way to put it back. AGPM is not involved in creating new links for you. So any questions on that I might be able to answer at this point? Yeah, just come right up to the mic if you would, please. Just take a second.
I'm a bit surprised and disappointed that you can't control that people still go in directly and make changes. And I'm wondering, can you do that by revoking some privileges from them and thereby forcing them to use AGPM?
Yeah, so your question is, gosh, it certainly seems like it's not an ideal situation, that there's no way to guarantee / force people to not use AGPM. Is that your question? There is some prescriptive guidance on Microsoft's website in the group policy blogs that does have continual advice. In fact, there's actually 2 stages of advice. Advice number 1 is actually how to there is a way to put some light fencing around that, okay? And I'll try to demonstrate some of that as I go through the architecture. And then there's a second piece of guidance that's really very clever that describes how you actually, a lot of the original guidance said you must use a domain admin account. In fact, I'm going to be doing that in terms of my architecture demonstration. But some of the guidance actually goes the extra mile and says, it turns out you don't absolutely need a domain admin to make this magic happen. You can actually have a limited rights user, and there are a bunch of rights that you need to give. But long story short, it's not a hard and fast thing. You do have to put light fencing around it. Will that change in the future? I don't know, because again, remember the way that Windows works. If you are an admin, you can always take ownership of stuff. That's just the way it is. And so can you definitely work around things? Yes. Are there some remediations for that we're going to talk about as well? Hang tight. I'm going to get to some of that stuff. So that's the deal. All right. Is there another question that I might be able to answer during this time? Yeah, come right on up. Just come up. How much of this is scriptable? As far as I know, 0. So there's no PowerShell interface to this. At this time, I think that would make a welcome addition. I think that seems like it's a logical place to go and be scriptable. There is we'll talk about a special thing you can do between domains around the bend, but it's not exactly scriptable. Okay, yeah, 1 and 2, and then we'll wrap it up and go on. Go ahead, yes? How many GPOs do you have, my friend? You don't want to confess, do you? His question was, is there a limit on how many I can control at any one point? And as far as I know, there's probably no practical limit. I'd probably do them in batches of 100 just to be safe. Why not? You know? But, yeah, number 2 back there, and then you can get number 3, okay? Yep, go ahead. Yep. Yeah, so your question is, what does undo checkout do? And yep, your changes will be rolled back to the last copy if you're undoing. Well, if you've undone checkout, it will no longer check. Yeah, it should trash your changes at that point, if I understand correctly. We could test it if you want to, but there are some nuances there. Yeah, go ahead. Come right up.
What about support for untrusted forests, DMZs, or other security boundaries?
You might be squeezing into an area that is beyond my reach. So I'll tell you what, if you want to write up your question in a meaningful way that I can help you out the best I can, and I can try to pitch it to some other folks as well and see if I can get you a straight answer. Is that fair enough?
Great.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, let's go ahead and continue onward here. All right. So let's talk about the architecture. And you know what, man? I love the architecture of AGPM. I'm just one of these, I'm a sap for good architecture. You know, I just hate it when there's databases I got to deal with and agents and stuff everywhere and stuff like that. The best part about AGPM, one of the best parts, not only does it give you fantastic control, but it also just has just one of the coolest architected products I've ever used. So the idea is that there is a service that you install on your either a domain controller or a member server. In this demonstration, I'm going to happen to be doing on a domain controller. You could do it on either a DC or a member server. And what that service does is it takes your incoming requests, sees what rights you have into the database, and then will proxy those requests into the database and also allow you to deploy live. So it's the traffic cop. The service is the traffic cop, and that's all it does. You only need one AGPM server per domain. There are some advanced and weird configurations where you could have multiple domains using the same AGPM server. Honestly, my brain doesn't really work that well for that kind of stuff. If I had to give you some prescriptive guidance, if you had multiple domains, you could probably end up doing lots of fun things, but my suggestion is that you end up doing one AGPM server per domain. So that's just my advice. You could probably do some other weird stuff, but I wouldn't do that. The second thing is that there's this client piece. Gosh, client is such a loaded word. Man, when I think client, I think sometimes my brain thinks agent. Sometimes my brain thinks client-side extension. Sometimes my brain thinks other things. But a client, the AGPM client, is on your machine, the one you use every day to make group policy happen. Not Sally's machine, not Bob's machine. The client goes on your machine. The client is what talks to that server service and then talks to the database. So don't deploy the client everywhere. That doesn't make any sense. You deploy the client on 3, 5, 4 machines, your machine and your, does that make sense? Okay. Here's the big need. AGPM 4.0 requires the latest greatest on the server and the client. This gets technical and geeky, but it comes down to that the latest greatest client and the server have the maximum what's called client-side extensions. These are the moving parts of group policy. So all the group policy preferences and all the latest greatest stuff and all the stuff that Windows 7 has, because when it checks it out, it uses the underlying architecture underneath to get the job done. So long story short, you need to have the latest greatest server and client, and by client I mean your machine, not Sally's machine, your machine, to take advantage of AGPM, okay? All right, and we talked about this. A neat fact is that AGPM is already built upon stuff that works, as opposed to a brand new architecture that could be brittle and weird. So it just works. It just works upon the group policy GPMC APIs, which is super nice. Server installation is not hard, okay, but let's talk about some tips. The service account itself, again, is the broker for all actions. When you're doing the install, you're going to use the local system on DCs. Again, my guidance here says domain admin account if you're not on a domain controller. If you are okay with that and you like to make things easy, it will work with a capital W. If you want to try to do the extra prescriptive guidance I talked about on the Microsoft Group Policy Team blog, which will give you less than domain admin rights, you're welcome to try it out, people have told me that it works. When you when you install AGPM, there's one guy or a team of guys that are the super people who can do stuff inside AGPM by default. This might be you, could be somebody else. So when you're doing this, you can create a single NT-style group, or you can, like for instance, AGPM owners, or you could use a person like AGPM owner, one particular account, or you could name it the capital A administrator account. There's a lot of choices. In my demonstration, I'm going to use AGPM owner, single person to do that. Also, on the client, again, client means your machine, you need to open up the firewall. In fact, the install will actually ask you to do it automatically, which is kind of nice. What I do see is that people sometimes forget to install the AGPM client on their own machines. They, of course, knew that they installed the server, but oops, they forgot to install the client on their own machines. Don't be that guy. And then the second thing is, again, don't install it everywhere. Install it on your management station. So don't install it in the right places and don't install it in the wrong places. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm just switching gears here real fast. I know you can't see what I'm doing. I'm rectifying that momentarily. Okay. All right, any questions about the architecture while I'm doing an install?
Where's all the information backed up at?
No, get to the mic, I can't hear you.
Where are all the changes logged and where's the data backed up at?
I wish I had something to give you because that's such a great question because we're about to cover that in 10 seconds. Sir, have we ever met before? No, just kidding. You set me up really well. Okay, so let's talk about the server first. Here is the install routine for the Desktop Optimization Pack 2010 refresh. I think 2011 is on the way. So anyway, long story short, here's Advanced Group Policy Management. There are these 6 utilities that you get in MDOP. We're only going to be talking about AGPM today. And I do want to be super clear, and something that I have done wrong, I hate to admit, is I don't know how to read. And so here on the install page, just for reasons I do not know, is the current version and the old version. Don't be that guy that installs the old version. There is a supportability matrix. In other words, if you don't have Server 2008 R2, or you don't have Windows 7 on your machine, the client, there is some ability to use old stuff and the new stuff. It is definitely not recommended, so don't do that. Go ahead. I can't hear you at all. This room is too huge. Go ahead. We'll meet in the middle. Go ahead. Stay right there. Yep. That's a good question. Oh, that's, yeah, I don't know. That's a really good question. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'll have to get to the bottom of that. I think you stumped the chump. That is a good question. His question is, how come it supports 32-bit on the server if it only supports 2008 R2? So I get, yeah, because there's also 2008. I guess the idea, let me rephrase it then. I guess for clarity's sake, for full supportability to get all the client-side extensions, you're going to want to use Server 2008 R2. I guess that's probably the best answer. Okay. So with that in mind, I'll install the server right here. Now I've already got some accounts ready to go here, I'm pretty sure. If I don't, make sure I do. Users. Okay, I do. All right. So there's AGPM starting up. I'm going to click Next, say yes to that little guy right there. And here is where I'm going to install the server. Of course, it makes sense in program files. Now let's talk to my friend's question in the back. He said, where is all this stuff stored? Now, all this stuff is stored by default in a place I'm not super fond of, program data. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just not fond of it. So what I like to do is I like to change it over to like C:\\AGPM-archive, or D, or some place that is meaningful to me. It has to be on this server or appear to be local to this server. And so this is where I'm going to put it here, AGPM archive, and we'll take a look inside of it in a little while. I'm on a domain controller, so I'm going to definitely use the local system account. Again, if you wanted to use a non-domain admin account / limited user rights, again, you'll have to go track down that guidance. The user account I want to use is called AGPM owner. Okay, giving that guy all the rights. I'm going to open up the firewall port. And of course, I speak all these languages perfectly and fluently. So in case you can't see that, this is how many languages I speak today. There's no penalty at all for just installing all that stuff. Go ahead and click Install, and it only takes a minute. Again, all it's doing is installing a service running on this particular box. Now, you may be thinking, uh-oh, wait a minute. What happens if this box goes down? Won't I lose my ability to create new GPOs in the archive? Yes. Can you cluster this? My understanding is that the prescriptive guidance on this is you can technically cluster it. I do not think from a supportability perspective Microsoft will support a clustered AGPM server, though. Go ahead. Yeah, your question is, can I make it on a share? My understanding is that it has to appear to be local to the box, like NAS storage or D drive. It has to appear to be local to it. So, okay, so now that that guy's done, let's go ahead and let's close this out. We're done with this guy, and a whole lot of nothing happens. Why is that? Because we didn't load the client. Okay? A whole lot of nothing happens. In fact, the only thing that you'll see that's anything different on this machine, if we go to Computer Manage, and I'm currently logged in as administrator, if I take a look at the config here and I take a look for the services, there it is. There's my brand new AGPM service waiting and doing absolutely nothing for me right now. It's waiting for requests. So let's talk about the client piece. So now that the server is done, the client piece, oh, I closed my MDOP window here, so let me go ahead and get that puppy open here. That's this guy right here. Fantastic. AGPM, we'll go with the client piece. Install the client, 64-bit, fantastic. Now again, I just happen to be deciding on this particular box, I want to be editing group policy objects, so I happen to be loading the client here. On your domain controllers, this is optional. On the particular box I'm on, it's just, that's what I want to use. Go ahead, my friend. Yes. Okay, go ahead. Yep, your question is, most of our stuff is 2003. All our domain controllers are 2003. Is there any penalty at all for spinning up one brand new Server 2008 R2, getting AGPM on it, having my machine being Windows 7, and it all working perfectly? Is that your question? It will work perfectly. You want to define everything on that, all of your group policy management? Yeah, all of your group policy management will be perfectly perfect in that scenario. Okay, so now that that's done, now let's take a look at what we've done. Now we've got the server going, we've got the client going, and still a whole lot of nothing happens. Now, that's actually not true. Something actually did happen. I'm going to close the GPMC here and refire it back up. And in doing so, I should see my new change control node. Now, with that in mind, let's get started to use it. Now, you will do this exact thing I just did and have a panic attack, and it will look like this. You'll click on the change control node and think, I can't wait to get started doing what Jeremy's about to talk about next. So you click on the change control node, and two things happen. First, and I don't know why, AGPM has a little mini seizure. And it's happening right now, and you can't see it. Yep, it's having a little mini seizure. And then the next thing it's going to do, see, it says it's not responding. There it is, establishing a connection, and then fail. Now, again, I knew this was coming, so it's not really fail. So what is it saying? It's saying, you, the guy who installed it, who's running it right now, this isn't you. Does that make sense? You gave some other guy, AGPM owner, permissions on me, and it's not you. So I fail. I have an error 5, right? We all know error 5. Error 5 is access denied. So you have an access denied into this thing you just created. Everybody on board so far with the problem? So what are we going to do to fix this? Okay, it's not hard at all. We're going to switch user here. Log on as that guy, AGPM owner. Now hopefully. Okay. We're going to log on as this guy. We're going to give whoever we want access rights to that. And we're going to talk about that and how access rights work right around the bend. So let me go ahead and show you how this works real fast. Yeah, sure, go ahead. Okay, that's a great question. So his question is, how do the clients guarantee to find the correct AGPM server, especially if there's lots of them? Is that your question? Turns out there's an ADM or an ADMX template that will say, my client in this OU use that server over there. Now, the default, of course, is it's going to check to see on the server you're on if it has it. But if you have multiple domains with domain AGPM servers, you can dictate which ones use which. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is run the gpmc.msc here. And I'm going to go into the, oh, I have to give my very important credentials here. All right, so now we should find the change control node. There we go. And again, we'll have a little mini seizure, but this time we are the right guy. Okay? I hope. Yo. You know, it's a weird thing. It's a GPMC problem. The GPMC asks for credentials under certain circumstances that I'm trying to get to the bottom of. So it depends on what access rights you have to get into the tool at all. But yeah, I know it too. I think I know what it is, but yeah. So here we are. It worked. No error. We had the seizure, but we had no error. So we're back in the club. The next thing we're going to do here under domain delegation, this is us. We are the AGPM owner. Let's add ourselves, the guy called administrator, just in this example. And we will give ourselves full rights. We'll talk about the rights right around the corner, I promise. I'm just proving a point here. Let me go ahead and switch user. And then if I log back in as this guy who didn't have access 3 seconds ago, in fact, you can see access is denied. All I'm going to do, right-click, refresh, and no problem. Okay? In your AGPM implementation, do not panic that you get that access is denied error. I've been down that road. I've had that experience. Hopefully, I've given you the tools to not have that pants-wetting experience. Yes, come right up to the mic. Come all the way. Yep, just come on over.
I just wanted to double check. When you installed the service,
yep.
Did you install the client on the same server? Or
I did. Yep, I did it really fast while somebody was asking a question. I installed the client on the server just to prove the point.
Okay.
Yep, was that okay?
Yeah, I was just making sure.
Yep. Remember what I said. You load the server, and nothing happens.
Right.
You load the client, nothing still happens until you close and reopen the GPMC. Okay, good. All right, so let's go back to this thing over here. Excellent. Where are you? Raise your hand. Yes, ask your question now. No, that is not an undocumented feature. That is just, it's just you put the locks on a car and you handed the keys over to not you. He had to make copies of the keys to give to you. That's all. That's it. It's not a bug. It's by design. Yep. I like it. I think it's cool. All right, so I put this slide in here, again, just so you have access to it. Right after loading the server, do not panic, okay? You click on AGPM, you get this access to denied stuff. Don't forget, PS, just because you've installed AGPM, you do not somehow magically lose the ability on the regular group policy world. And I know you can't see what I'm doing. I'm just getting set up for my next thing. Okay. We just did it. We used the AGPM owner to grant rights to whoever you want. Also, you could use a group and add people to that group. I didn't use a group. You would probably want to use a group, but it's just the example I'm using here. Okay, so we've already done all this stuff. We've gone with the flow. We've controlled uncontrolled GPOs. We've created new GPOs live and, well, and only offline here. We checked it out. We made a bunch of settings changes. You could also see reports of old stuff as well. We're going to cover that now. We also saw me check in a group policy object and also deploy a checked in group policy object live into the real world. And you saw me have to link it because when it was captured or controlled, it didn't have any links. So we did all that stuff. What I do want to talk about next is history, differences, and rollback. What's very cool, and we'll use this as a reference slide. Let me just go right into the demonstration here. Let's go back to, this is the original set. So the second thing I showed you was installing fresh. This one is already ready to rock. So what I'm going to do here is, let's go back over to this guy over here. And we'll pick West 2 again. And gosh, I can't remember all the changes I made to West 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click and go to the Settings HTML report of this thing. So it's looking at the last copy it knows about in the archive, okay, in the archive. Now, my friend asked me earlier, what is in the AGPM archive exactly? That was really your question earlier, and here it is. Oops, sorry. In the AGPM archive, gosh, that should look super familiar if you've ever taken some, if you've ever gotten deep into group policy stuff. So what you'll see here is this looks exactly like a group policy backup report, because that is really a group policy backup set, because that's exactly what this is. So in the archive are backups, and, well, there can be a lot of them. And we'll talk about how to get around having a lot of them in just a couple minutes. So gosh, in West Sales, we've got, okay, well, ask me later, and then you'll, okay, we'll do that. And you'll see here we've got some, yep, sure enough, we've done some stuff. Enabled, disabled, and enable that guy. Excellent. So that's currently live. But I kind of can't remember maybe how this thing progressed over time, or if I were to make changes, if I were to right-click over and check it out, and I'm making more changes here. All right, I've now checked it out. You see the red. I'm going to right-click and click Edit here. I'm going to make some changes. In fact, if I go to Policies, Admin Templates, Control Panel, you'll remember that I disabled this guy. I'm going to make him not configured, because that was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that. And if I go to here, Enabled, no, that's cool. I'll keep that guy. And this guy is enabled, and actually, I meant to have him disabled. So I've made some changes now in my group policy land, just some different stuff. And now I'm going to right-click over this guy, and I'm going to check him in. Okay, done making my changes. Everything's good there. And what we're about to see is that I can actually figure out what's changed over time. Every time you check it in and do stuff to it, let me go ahead and deploy this thing too. See, and now I can restore the links, because we knew what the links were. So when we checked it out, we actually grabbed where the links were at that time too. And in fact, those links were successfully restored. So while I'm here, let me go to, well, let me take a look at the history. And I look at the history here. Wow, turns out during the time we were here together, I've made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've made 8 changes on this one GPO between checking it out, checking it in, and editing it. Turns out, though, you can make it a little easier on yourself and looking at just the unique versions. Okay, so the times that I've actually checked it in. So between this time and this time, what are the differences? So this differencing report can actually express what happened then and what does it look like now. And what the table has in the slide deck is it'll show you red, green, and blue, which will express things that have been added or changed in the group policy. So here, I've got minus, this thing got removed, plus /blue means it's been changed, and clearly we have nothing that was added. So added would be green. And by the way, in case you're curious, and I like this too, why it's got check marks and color code, it's for colorblind folks. So if you happen to be colorblind, you can actually not refer to the color, but you can refer to the symbol, which actually is pretty cool. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and go back to this thing. All right, we did all that. Okay, now we're ready to work with others. So here's the idea. Remember, you saw me ever so briefly get logged on as that AGPM owner guy and give myself the rights to do stuff. Of course, I gave myself full control rights, which of course means I can do whatever I want in the database. I keep saying database. It's not really a database. Again, it's sort of it's just the service that connects back to those files. There's no SQL involved. There's no real database. I just think of it like a database-like thing in my head, okay? It's not really a database. And again, I've now given myself full control to do whatever I want, including giving you the rights to do what I say you should be doing, okay? I'm giving you the rights now. So those rights, those 3 rights that are built into AGPM are read-only reviewer, approver, and editor. Editor tends to be the most common. The thing about editor is, when you give somebody editor rights, you don't actually give them the ability to directly edit those guys. In fact, it should be, in my opinion, called requester editor. If I give you the rights to this, I'm actually saying, when you click for editing, turns out I got to give you permission first. You're an editor, but you're requesting it, then you can edit. So edit becomes requester editor. So editor requests stuff, makes offline changes, and then continues to request changes for live environment change. So when you're ready to rock with it, you're going to ask permission again, then I'm going to put it in place for you as an approver. So there's read-only, there's approver, and there's editor. There's also some special permissions as well, and you can blend these things if you want to. What was that? I heard you cry. You can't wait to get a PDF copy of this in your inbox when TechEd is over. How do you get that I hear you cry? Where's my friend who's all the way in the back with my little basket? Wave your hand again. Yes, this guy. Turn around, see this guy right there. If you didn't already, yep, that guy right there. If you didn't already scan the little code, just drop a card. I will get you the PDF chapter, which has this wonderful chart. Yes, my friend. So who can reject checkouts is your question. It's either approver or definitely administrator. I'm pretty darn sure it's approver. Okay, but I would have to verify just for fun. Okay, there's also advanced settings. There's actually super granular settings as well. So these are really, there's kind of rolled up twice basically. Right? But I will, you can probably find it in the e-chapter, which you will get. Okay, so let's talk about a story at some company. And I just, I don't know if this is the way your company is going to work, but this is the way my company works. We've got 3 admins, each with different levels of ability, and I mean technical ability. Okay, I mean. Look, we love our boss, and I'm sure if your boss is next to you, just hold his ears really fast. We love our bosses, but when it comes to group policy, sometimes they don't always get it. They think they're in charge, but it's really, we're in charge. So what we're going to do is we're going to give the IT manager read rights. Regis, he might know about group policy objects enough to be dangerous, and if there's a problem, it's his butt that's on the line. Okay, so we're going to give him read-only rights. We're going to give Eddie, the branch office manager, he'll have editor rights, and we'll call him maybe newish to group policy objects. So he'll be able to request stuff and then request it to be either creating new or to deploy. And then there's April, the IT goddess. She knows the company inside and out, really knows group policy also. So these are you take the level of ability of the person and you map them to the roles, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to make April the owner. We're going to make Eddie the editor. April is the approver or the admin. Eddie is the editor, and Regis is the reviewer. Okay, that's what we're going to do right now here. Okay. Now the workflow, as I've mentioned before, AGPM workflow is about email. So let me show you how this all works. I'll just get right into it because I'm running a little short on time. So the way that this puppy works here. Now, I've got, this guy is Eddie, so I'm going to right-click over the change control node, and I'm going to go to new control GPO. Uh-oh, that's not good. Right, he needs rights, so let me go ahead and give him rights. Eddie is the editor. Excellent. Okay, so now we'll go to the change control node. Very good. He wants to do something new. He doesn't get it. He's got to ask permission. So the GPO name will be called West3, and his comment would be, I really need this to work. Can you make it all happen for me? What happens is that everybody in the AGPM system gets an email. Okay? In fact, you can see that it says notify administrator of pending requests. So if we go back over here to April's system, and if I check, I've got mail. And if you're wondering what application this is Eudora from 1997. Thank you. AppCompat works. Okay, so April gets an email that says, hey, look, Eddie requested this GPO called West3, and if you are ready to rock, I'm ready to rock with you. Fine, cool. So think about it. April doesn't live in AGPM. She lives in email. She lives in email. So what we're going to do, after she checks her email, she goes back to the change control node. She goes to the pending tab, and pending is where she's ready to do stuff. So pending create. Right-click, approve. You got it. Don't blow it up like you did last time. Okay? The downside here, Eddie does not get an email back saying this part has been accomplished. That's not a bug. That's just by design. I hope that they will clear that up sometime soon. So Eddie comes back over here. He goes to the change control node. He refreshes. He looks for West3. There it is. He does his checkout. He does his edit. When he's ready to deploy, here's what happens. He goes and deploys. He doesn't get it. I'm ready. I'm obviously fast forwarding. I'm ready. I made my changes. Can you help me out? Boom. Submits it. April gets another email. Okay? She gets the email. Let's see. Boom. Oops. You've got mail. Request deployment. Eddie says, I need it deployed. Maybe he would also say this has to be linked to West sales because AGPM will not do that by default for newly created group policy objects. So he might put that in the note. So April goes back to pending. I don't see it. No problem. You refresh. West sales, you'll approve it. Notice how it's not linked. You do the work. It goes live. Succeeded. We'll refresh here. And we'll take West 3 and we'll link it over to West sales users. That is how the workflow in AGPM works. Okay? So everybody here on the AGPM 2 line is email. That is not granular. That's just showbiz. Everybody, even if they're not involved in that particular group policy object, gets email. That's the deal. We already talked about that, did all that. Excellent. Yeah, the question is Exchange involved somehow or anything special like that? Nope, it's SMTP all the way. Yep. Okay, so AGPM also has this thing called templates. Now, those of you who was in my pre-con, excellent. Thank you for both. Thank you for the 2 for reappearing. Apparently, I upset 47 other people. So long story short, I talked about starter group policy objects and how you had a limited ability to create kind of a launching off point. What AGPM templates allow you to do is to take any control GPO and literally save it as a template. For instance, you and I work at a bank branch. I could have a group policy object full of settings that I want you to use, and you would pick it as that template. Okay? So it's an extra little bonus feature that you get. There's some other miscellaneous things that I want to cover in the 3 minutes I have left, which is you get the ability to recycle group policy objects by deleting them. They go into the trash zone, and you can either restore them or destroy them. Okay? So things in the archive can be destroyed if you're so inclined. There's also a new feature in AGPM 4.0 that lets you search on all of your group policy objects and any of these columns as well. So if you want to search for the ones that are changed by this person or that person or by a name, you can quickly search in the search bar, which is super nice. Another new feature is that you don't have to keep maintaining every time you make a change in group policy land, in AGPM land, to keep making copies. You can save X number of copies. Maybe it's 5. Maybe you only want to see the last 5 copies of the group policy object. So you don't waste disk space. It's kind of nice. Okay? There are permissions available upon the group policy itself. The idea, again, is that we have a normal scenario that I just went over, but you, yes you have the special ability for the nurse's desktop GPO to do it without getting approval. You could do things like that if you're so inclined. Okay? Last but not least, that's important here is this idea called production delegation. It's sort of a funny name, but what it means is when you click go and you deploy that puppy into the live world, these permissions are stamped upon the group policy object. So we don't have all the time in the world today to talk about how to put those fences around that we talked about to prevent modifying the group policy objects, but one of those steps is to understand and how to correctly produce a good-looking production delegation for your team. Some advanced stuff as well. A new thing that you can, one other thing that we talked about kind of earlier, my friend Chris in the front row here, when he went out drinking last night and he edited that group policy object, turns out he didn't use AGPM to do it. He went around AGPM to do it, and he shouldn't have done that. We're going to keep you on staff, but don't do that again, okay? Yeah. I understand you couldn't wait for my approval, but come on, man, that's how it works. So long story short, if we know this, he can import from production and catch up from the stuff that was live, even though you should have been using AGPM, okay? And then also, you can import from file. This is a scenario if you have multiple domains or multiple forests, you can actually do a backup from one forest and import from file. So you can have a completely offline test lab in a closet somewhere and get those GPOs into your real production using import from file. Okay? So some parting thoughts here. Look, AGPM, it's not hard to deploy. I did it in like 4 minutes. The one tip I want to give you before I say goodbye here is really, you're going to have a big group hug with your team. I did express how there's really no guaranteed way to force your admins for definitely using it. So I want to make sure that as you're going through the process of getting AGPM installed, that you're thinking about ensuring that everybody is really on board. With that in mind, guys, this is my last talk here at TechEd. Thank you very much. I really appreciate coming here. Thank you very much.